So I put out a call on the channel about a month or so ago, I'd say, for Four Against Darkness suggestions as to what I should get. And I went through the material that I have and what I was looking for. I got a lot of great comments on the video, and I went and spent some money, and I bought some books. So this video is going to show you what I bought in response to the comments that I got. I couldn't get everything that everyone suggested because it was just too much stuff, and I think my haul is pretty good. I got 4 books, and I'm going to look through them with you. A couple of them I don't actually think are really have necessarily videos on the internet. The one I think I got the most suggestions for, just in terms of numbers, I haven't gone back to check, there were 2, but this Tales from the Adventurers Guild got a lot of suggestions. And I'll say one of the things about these books that's always bothered me is there's like no date on any of them or many of them, so it's impossible to know sort of sequentially how they are published. And I know it doesn't necessarily matter for gameplay, but here I'm hampered a little bit because I don't know if this is the most recent release or what. In any case, Tales from the Adventurers Guild, we can look at the piece of art here. The other thing that's always been a thing for me with these books is I do like the variety of art, and there is a credit at the beginning about who illustrated it and sort of where the art comes from, but there aren't individual artistic credits anywhere, and I wish that were not the case. So I have no idea who did this art, but looks pretty cool. Let's look at the back here. Adventure Calls. This supplement gives optional rules, of course. It gives guidelines for troop play, rules for stealth, streetwise banking, magic lockers, gambling and hidden treasure troves, new equipment spells, new monster tables, rumor scenes, red herrings, 9 new thematic dungeons, rules for joining an adventurer's guild, tables for guild jobs and unique minor quests, rules allowing you to play with 1 to 3 characters. That was called out specifically in the comments. There's some trinkets and a ready-to-run hex crawl campaign. So, taking a look inside here, we won't go through everything, and we're not going to look through even the table of contents here, but we will flip through to see a little bit about what we're talking about here. So, troop play is a springboard for campaign style, where instead of creating a party of 4, you create a cast of many, and then you pick the best men and women for the job for every mission. They recommend creating 12 characters, so you have the equivalent of 3 parties to play. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I know that in my Four Against Darkness life, I'm like always creating new characters and playing some of them, leaving some of them lying around. And unfortunately, I'm not systematic enough that I have like 12 or more character sheets filled out nicely that I could just pick and choose from. But I do like this concept. And also, because as we know in this game, at least one of the things that's my favorite to do is to just make new characters. And once you get a lot of the 4AD books, you have such a wide range of things to choose from. You could play a moose folk, or you could play a troll, or you could play a fairy, or whatever. So that is it's a nice concept, and there are some rules to go with it to have what you can do with getting new characters and having a home base, and you could really get quite detailed in that regard. There's a new rule about stealth, and honestly, I feel like this already was a rule, but I guess it wasn't, which is essentially a way of sneaking by things, and I definitely am going to be picking this up regardless, and there's some modifiers to the role for various types of characters you may have, and obviously you might have to thematically readjust that depending on if you're playing a character that's not listed there. And also there are modifiers for the environment that you're in. So everything from a large ship to a sewer is going to give you a different benefit or detriment in terms of stealth. And it will explain that if you are successfully using stealth and you want to ambush the foes, what that means, or just basically sneak by them. So I like that for sure. There's a long section here on what to do with treasure and creating banks and things. This is not something I personally would do, but I have a question for the 4AD viewers who are listening here. This Treacheries of the Troublesome Towns has been mentioned in a bunch of different supplements that I have, but I have not actually ever found that this is a published thing. So if it is a published thing, I'd be curious to know about it. If it isn't or it was abandoned, I'd be curious to know about that too. Perhaps somebody who's deeper into this game than I will be able to answer that, because I have other books where this comes up and I've looked for it and not found it. New equipment: a 10-foot pole, a lantern hook. This is allows you to not carry your lantern, but have it on a hook and put it down if you're fighting, but then you have to see whether or not whether it became destroyed in the fight. I like that. I don't know that I would remember to do it, but it's I like the concept of that. I like the rule that gives you something sort of mechanical in the world to do, and the light little rule that goes with that. There are some advanced poison resistance training, allows you to essentially slowly build up resistance to poison in your body, and it explains how that impacts you if you encounter poison. I'm not going to look through all of this, as I said, just showing you some highlights of what is in here. There's some rules for looking for trouble in the least respectable parts of town, and some modifiers to this new concept of streetwise and what you can do with it. So it's essentially like a mini game, I think, you're doing a roll and looking for clues, and then you are listening to rumors, and then the rumors is going to send you to a corresponding paragraph in the scenes list, which is here, and they don't want you to look at the scenes list back here, but I think, and so I haven't, but I think what the scene is going to do is maybe give you a small task to do or a mini quest or something like that. So this looks kind of interesting and something that I will do at a certain point. I think my plan is, with these books, maybe to create a new party and specifically just try to play out some of the material that I have, some of my new material only, because I don't want to get waylaid into the old material before I experience the new material, if that makes sense. So there is a table here for a treasure map and where the map could lead to. There's a riffraff table. Perhaps these things come up with this thing here with the scenes that we skipped over. Outside of town ambush table, a weird monsters around town table. We'll just take a look at one here. There's a scissorhead beetle. It's the highest character level +2. It's a weird monster with 8 life, treasure -1, morale -1. If a character rolls a 1 when defending from this giant beetle, his shield is destroyed. If the hero has no shield, the character must roll to defend again. On a failure, he loses half life, rounded up, and lose the use of a random arm. So it will tell you what that is until all your life points have been healed. So it seems pretty rough. Chaos Cult table. All right, we have some thematic dungeons here. The average dungeon in 4AD is a mixture of many common elements that may be found nearly everywhere. If you prefer, you may generate a theme for the dungeon before entering to create an internal logic that will dictate the types of monsters and treasure found, or just for the sake of variety. Some of these themes create smaller but deadlier dungeons. These are just perfect for the guild missions. So this is a little bit similar to if you have Twisted Minions or I think it's Twisted Foes, where there is like an impact on the dungeon when you set out. If you're playing with that rule, that's going to impact, say, all the minions you encounter to give a twist to that. And there is a theme table here that you could roll on this D10, a giant's lair, a ghastly mind, a fiendish abyss. Well, let's just roll on, let's just look up delving deeper and deeper. And so we would turn to that and see what the impacts of that. Looks like they have specific minions with them, or major foes in this case as well. And let's see. So in this particular case, it says, play this mission as a standard random dungeon using any one that you have. In any room, including corridors, you have a 1 in 6 chance of finding stairs that go to a lower level of the dungeon. So you roll that when you go in there. And the deeper that you go, of course, the more dangerous it becomes. So you're increasing by 1 the level of all the dangers. So this might be something that you attempted this particular mission with a stronger party, perhaps, and not like a low-level party. The Adventurers Guild. By their own nature, adventurers tend to stick together and give mutual support. You can assume that your hometown has an Adventurers Guild, and this is going to be discussing what the guild can do for you and offering jobs and things that will pay you money, as well as you need to pay the guild back your money. So it's a relationship that you have with this external group that's going to be protective of you, and you get some advantages of that. So you can have attempted resurrection for any fallen members of your party, and it explains what this costs. And you do need to pay for every adventurer 10% from the end. So you also get, here it says, the guilds have an expert cartographer. So if you buy a map, you can see what you get with that. And we saw that map table, I think that refers to it. You can also get some money from the guild, every adventurer, to help you play. And it tells you how much money the guild starts out with. And if the guild runs out of money, then all the benefits are gone, because it had run out of money, and you can't leave the guild until you fill back up the coffers to that money. So this is creating some external relationship here, and we have a D6 list of guild jobs. So there's some minor quests that you can do, the rumors table that I showed you earlier, or playing the standard dungeon. And the minor quests have to do with, like, clean up my castle, or maybe clean up my sewers. And you'll have a little explanation here. So if you're going to do this job, a noblewoman has found the entrance to some underground locales under an area of an ill-kept castle she just inherited. She doesn't have a map of the place, and servants she sent down to inspect it have not returned. Ominous sounds are coming from the place, and it's obvious that some creatures have taken residence there. Before spending money to renovate the place, the lady asked the guild to clean up the underground chambers. She will pay a basic fee of 25 gold per character, plus 2 gold per every slain minion or vermin, and 20 gold for every boss or weird monster slain. So you could get a nice bit of money there. We're going to generate a random dungeon of 10 rooms, keeping the treasure we find, spending 1 clue to find a hidden cache with a portrait of the noblewoman's ancestors, for which she will be ready to pay an additional 100 gold. The job may be a quick one, so you may not exit the dungeon and re-enter it later. You must complete the cleaning up in a single session, or you won't get paid. So again, you would be giving some of this money to your guild, but that's a great job to get and to do, perhaps as a precursor to something else if you want to have some money to spend on equipment or whatever. There's a sewer search. That sounds like it comes with some specific sewer vermin and sewer minions, etc. And now we come to what a couple people mentioned in the comments, the solo mission rules. This is a system for playing For Against Darkness, either solo or it says with every player assuming the role of one character. So it allows for true solo gaming with the core book, making adventuring possible with only one character. Essentially what it does, it doesn't alter the rules. It tweaks the levels of the major dangers and the number of minor monsters. So the numbers are tweaked based on the highest character level. So let's just say you're want to play with a level 2 character or whatever, it will explain to you how to do that. And it involves essentially doing some subtraction from the level that you're encountering, but then the monster is the same, and you're doing the subtraction both in the amount of monsters or minions you would encounter as well as the damage. And then there's this provision, night vision, so you don't have to be carrying a lantern, for example, that you would be hindered by. You can take some items and trinkets to set out, and some of these would include some healing potions and things of that nature. So it's pretty basic. There's a chart here that will explain how you can do this. So you could decide to play, for example, one level 1 character, and you would get all of these benefits. Or you could decide to play 2 level 3 characters, and that would be the only benefit you would get. Nobody would need a lantern, basically. So I think I'm definitely going to try this. I think the way 4 Against Darkness has been written, obviously from the outset, with needing 4 characters or being conceptualized with 4 characters, yields character types that work well with each other, obviously. So I suspect for trying this out, I'm going to try it out with 2 characters, not just the 1, because I think you might lose too much just in terms of the enjoyment of watching the mechanics play out, of, using abilities that work well in conjunction with a different type of character. I think the richness would be lost a bit if you ran just the 1 character. And for me, at least, the mechanics of this game are easy enough that, it's possible to run 4 characters, and I think it would be very, very easy also to run 2 or even 3. So I think I'll probably try this just to see how it goes with 2 characters at some point. But I like the idea of this, especially if the idea of it would bring gamers to this who might be put off by running the 4 characters. Of course, I think you have to get pretty deep into the system itself to find this rule on page 60, whatever, of this supplement. But in any case, I am glad it's here. I'm glad it was pointed out to me, and I'm certainly going to try it. There's a trinkets table. These are some of the trinkets that were mentioned earlier. And of course, you could just, as with anything, you could just bring all of these into your own game without the rules that go with them necessarily in terms of the single player. There are spells available through 4 wizards, elves, and other casters that belong to an adventurer's guild. So there's some new spells there. And let's see, we get at the end here, there's a summary of the rules for the guild. And I think this is, I probably am going to also do this, create some type of guild. I suspect for me, I'll go outside of 4 Against Darkness into some of my random tables and just kind of roll up something like a place for them or whatever. In fact, I can see off to the side, I have this Academies of the Arcane book that is part of the Troika system that I'm going to be doing a presentation video on Troika in a bit, but I think that's a book that has a lot of random tables for creating like a magic academy, and I think I'll do that, and that will be my guild. And there is a sample campaign setting here. I'm not going to get too much into this due to the length of time I'm spending, but it is giving you a basic way of creating some terrain and then suggesting which books that you might have that you could use to roll on that terrain if you just want sort of somebody walking through hex crawl. And some of them are obvious, like when you get to mountains, if you have more mountainous mayhem, this is one of the books that I have that I mentioned is one of my favorite ones, how to use that. So this is really more for an advanced player. And by advanced, I mean somebody who has a lot of 4 Against Darkness material to make use of this, but it kind of maps out a way to do that if you want to create a random hex crawl and just sort of walk through it. You could create your own random table. I don't actually see one here, which is a little surprising, to generate the terrain And there's an example of this played out here. And that's it. That is the Tales from the Adventurers Guild. Okay, next I got Greedy Gifts of the Guildmasters. This is patrons and adventurers for parties of all levels. And I really love this piece of art here. This guy with the little, I don't know if that's a mini dragon on his head or whatever. This is awesome. I love this. What does it say? What is thy bidding, my master? Tired of threading dungeons without a purpose? Try serving a patron. Within these pages, you will find 12 unique individuals eager to offer your adventurers special quests and rewards, expert skills, rules twists, and unique benefits for the meager price of serving their Machiavellian agendas. They might even join your party. It also features 9 mini dungeons, character traits, gear, skills, and rules, and the damsel in distress and fiendingo classes. Okay, so we will look at what we've got here. And this, the concept of like 12 things in a book reminds me of another book I have, which is, I can't remember what it's called, but the one that has like the 12, it has basically like 12 new different kind of, I think it's boss monsters. So, all right. Backers, benefactors, financiers, guarantors, quest givers, sponsors. Patrons are all these things and much more. Whatever their title and role is, they are first and foremost investors. They invest resources and time with the party, not out of generosity, but because they expect a return. Their boons and gifts to your characters are not disinterested, but a placement, hence the book's title. Greedy Gifts. This book offers you a list of patrons, optional rules that work as add-ons, etc. They're meant to add narrative elements to your campaigns. Now, it feels like this should be in the same book as the other one, but that's the way For Against Darkness is, I think. And I know that people on my channel, I'm sure elsewhere, have expressed a wish to have like kind of everything together. But in any case, choosing a patron, your party may take any single one of the patrons below as long as the conditions are met. You can change patrons before any adventure or swing back to another one as long as you respect the conditions. They're available at any level. And it says, but expert tier above level 5 plus can have patrons actually joining the party. And let's see, you can only have one at a time. You can't change patrons in the middle of an adventure. And if you solve a patron's major issue, and they give you an example here, you gain one of your patron's secrets, your choice, for free, and also an experience roll. Or you could gain 2 experience rolls instead if your patron has no secrets. And then it also says there's some mini dungeons scattered throughout the book, and here's an example of one we'll look at in a second. They are meant to serve as a springboard to design your own adventures using the patrons herein as thematic elements. And there's abbreviations of what you might find in a room, and then you can go to your own source material, and I think sometimes it's suggested to flesh that out. It says, feel free to flesh out these monsters by replacing their profile with those from books you have. So again, this is just an example of the ways in which this system is so free-flowing and like compatible with itself. And obviously, if you're watching this video and you play the game, you know exactly what I mean. If you're watching the video and you're new to the game, you can think of it almost as like a toy set where you put pieces together that enable you to do all these different things. And the pieces that you're putting together come from all the different books. And most of the books are very compatible with each other. So this book is mostly about deepening your party's background and motives. Some of the time, your patron will feel like music playing behind the scenes, and once in a while will exert itself to the forefront. They are crafted as individuals rather than organizations, but nothing stops you from saying your party interacts only with your patron's butler, etc. So you could think of it as, I think of a patron here as maybe attached to a guild. I think that's kind of the way that I would do it, going back to the guild there to try to, again, take material from the 2 different books and fit it together to what I want. And part of what also is great about this game, as you get more in depth with the material, is that you are interacting with the game and playing with the game in ways that don't necessarily even involve your characters doing a delve or walking into a space and encountering a monster or whatever, because now there's apparatus to create sort of externalities and the beginning of some type of world that they are in. So here's an example of one of those mini dungeons, and it's called the Lads Museum. It's for level 1, and you've got little maps here, and you can follow them in, and then there's the map key, so it's guarded by some dwarf sentinels, and you're just given this information about it, and you can walk through in that way and find what you get, and it gives you the reward for it. And then it also says, if you have Warlike Woes, which happens to be one of the ones I just bought, the Hills of Hammer and Axe rules apply to all rooms, so then it references something and you can add that onto it. But this is a neat little mini dungeon that you could play, a very basic one. But onto the patron profiles. The patrons in the following pages all use the same template. Some entries don't apply to all of them, so again, you can pick and choose, create your own, and it starts out with a faction, which includes the faction's name, as well as their allies and enemies. And these are written between these little brackets. These look kind of odd when you're reading through it. It looks a little bit like you're doing HTML programming, but anyway, it is written like this to indicate that there's, I guess, relationship with some other faction here, and they will count as enemies or not, and then there's implications for that. And let's see, there is a scoring. Your faction score with any group starts at 0, so you are earning some points as you do various things, and it says some quests or deeds allow you to raise your score, and then you get certain benefits from that. I'm not going to get too much into detail on these specific rules, just to try to give you a sense of what the content here is. If you complete a quest, you get 1 faction point. If you kill a faction allied boss, then you reduce your score, and these will have impacts with other factions. So you can't, for example, pick a patron if your faction score with them is negative. And then likewise, your faction score with patrons can improve your relations with their allies, and there's certain benefits to that, etc. There's conditions that patrons have. So, for example, the Snow Elf King, they hates orcs. So parties with orc characters cannot take him as a patron. So we have to respect the conditions at all times. And it says when a patron's profile lists a quest, it can be taken at the start of any mission. Completing this quest earns a patron's quest reward listed, so we don't roll on the epic rewards table. And you get the XP roll, and you get a faction point with your patron. And then everybody's going to have there may be some special rules here, as well as a secret. So many patrons have unique secrets, usually narrative plot twists that reveal a hidden facet of their personality. So in order to unlock a secret, you need to have these 5 faction points with the patron. So you're spending clues, and you have faction points, and then the secrets that you get are going to reveal some benefits, perhaps. There's recruitment that you can do, and again, we're going to sort of skip over some of these. Now, this is, again, back to this Treacheries of the Troublesome Towns that I haven't been able to find, but if you have that, you can select your patron to be the ruler of your city. In addition to the patrons, there are some new character traits. These were first introduced in Wayfarers and Adventurers, and if you watched my other video, you saw a little bit of that book, because I do own that book. Character traits are optional characteristics specific to a given character, and they're rolled before the game, and they will give you either some benefits or some detriments, or sometimes a little bit of both. So you could do that. There's some new gear. I'm not going to get into all the details on this. There's some new skills. Merchant patrons. In addition to their specific boons, all merchant patrons offer a 5% discount on the price of common items bought from them. This does not include magic items, etc. Any wandering merchant, alchemist, or healer you encounter will belong to your patron's faction on a d6 roll of 1. All right. So here's Andrea Underfoot. She lives at the intersection of the sun-kissed vale of the fungi folk and the vaporous valley of the moth people. And this place is famous for being the home of, she's a halfling adventurer, and I guess this could be a man too, Andrea, as we know, who excels in both roles. His wealth is said to be beyond compare, although he keeps the simple attire of a mushroom harvester. The halfling and his giant pig, Davy Snoutbottom, hunt for truffles and other rare mushrooms or alchemical ingredients to sell to the merchants and alchemists of these places. Easygoing and chummy, Underfoot is a popular patron for young adventurers and halflings. And here's the picture of Andrea Underfoot and Davy Snoutbottom. And we can see the faction that he belongs to. The conditions for having him as your patron: you must have at least one alchemist, conservationalist, fungi folk, or halfling, or have at least one faction point with the outpost. So we can see, again, sort of linking these together. Listing of who the allies are, the enemies are, and special rules for this if you have Underfoot as a patron. You can always choose the bribe reaction with halflings and fungi folk if this is available. You only need to spend 1 clue for a secret diet, and this is referencing another book. During outdoor adventures, you can replace any treasure roll by 2d6 common alchemical ingredients from whatever that's called, which I have, that has a whole bunch of alchemical herbs and things that you can find, and the reason for that is Andrea knows the good spots for harvesting. It says when serving this patron, replace entries 1 and 2 on any minion tables by 3d6 Rotten Hearts fungi folk, and it gives you the information about them. So you would need to kind of remind yourself of that, and you could see how the patron is going to impact your gameplay. And then there are some patron quests that you can roll, and it is referring you to other places to figure out what those are, and the reward for that is going to be a random magic item or 250 gold. There are some secrets that the patron has that you can uncover, and we won't go into those, but we already talked about what those could mean. And then there's a list of an optional list of what would give you a faction point. So completing a quest, or you get one if you defeat 20 hobgoblins or moth folk, or you complete a certain adventure in time, etc. And these are what will lose you points, including gaining points with any enemies. So that is remembering what the enemies are, interacting with the other patrons in this book. Just another totally different type. We have Damasu, the Ticket Master. And this patron lives in a closed wall town whose only access to the outside world is its coast and shipyard that connects it to another place. And this patron is the shipyard manager on the opposite end of this trade route. He's the very person sought after by kings, viscounts, and even elite adventurers to enter the resort town. He carries and distributes the so-called Zerma ticket, a golden ticket honored by the trade route shipyard to escort your party straight into the tourist attraction. So if you impress the merchant, you will be gifted passage into this town, and it says what he likes: gold, jewels and gems from all over the land, and he doesn't like cursed items or anything tainted by chaos. And there are, again, some specific allies and enemies, and the condition that when you bring back a jewel worth 100 gold or more, you can recruit him as a patron. And he has the possibility to, if you complete these quests, to earn an epic reward or an aquatic magic treasure of your choice. assuming you have this supplement, and I don't know off the top of my head what that supplement is. And again, some of the optional things that that's actually the other one. And again, some of the optional things that you can get faction points are listed here. You may or may not be able to do these depending on what types of books you have in this system. And then lastly, we'll quickly look at this, another one, the Withering Warlord. Something wicked rises in the west, banners of war, thundering drums, bellowing cries of battle. They say it is the Withering Warlord's enemies, uniting the orc tribes into an intense army that would crush through and more, then wave through the rest of the world and end the age of man. Some call him or her the Great Orc, the Lord of Woes, the Rainforest Warlord. In fact, nothing is certain. There are those who say he is a troll, gifted with the mind of a dragon and the sorcerous powers of a mind screamer. So this patron, who could be an orc or taller than an ogre, a ferocious barbarian born of a pure bloodline, has some needs as well, and you could have him as your patron as long as you do not include dwarves or elves of the common type, as they are his the warlord's sworn enemies. And some of the quests, for example, that he will put forth there is like, bring me his head. You want a dragon final boss, for example. He offers some good rewards, potentially 3d6 times 20 gold, or a magic two-handed slashing weapon, for example, that's going to have some benefits versus elves and dwarves. And it says when you serve this patron, you're going to replace entries 1 and 2 on any minion table by some rainforest elves. You're never going to get to meet your patron in person. However, any random orc or goblin boss you encounter will be in his service on a d6 roll of 1 to 2. And you could get something for that. And then finally, in the appendix, there are the aforementioned, I think it said 2 new characters. We'll just look at one, the damsel in distress. She is frail, beautiful, and innocent. Damsels in distress are an age-old male romantic fantasy and the bane of feminists. They have an unfortunate tendency to face dire predicaments and require male heroes to save them from a fate worse than death. While they don't do much, they provide their protector with motivation that can move mountains. There are several subclasses of them. You can have several per party, but they are likely to bicker. One of them counts as a 5th character, and the rest take normal character slots. She has no attacks. She can't cast spells either or use magic items to defend herself. No offensive capabilities, even against kittens. However, she adds half her level plus 1 rounded down as a protector bonus to a single dice roll on each turn made by a single male character. This can be an attack, defense save, or spell casting. Married characters, however, cannot use this bonus. For example, level 2 damsel adds plus 2 to her protector's rolls. And let's see, we can have several damsels directing their attention to the same character. The bonuses will stack. So, for example, if Kroom the Barbarian fights with 3 damsels in distress of level 1 holding his muscular legs, he could add plus 6 to his attack or defense rolls or split the bonus. So, and then there's some other subclasses of this I'm not going to get into, but I'm just presenting this because it's kind of amusing, and I think this adds to the kind of tongue-in-cheek flavor of this rule set that sometimes comes out. There's a wench in distress. I'm not going to read that. Leave that for yourself to discover. And the fiendingos are brought to being by unholy summoning and the souls of the dead. These are large demonic birds, graceful but murderous. They bear lizard-like skin collars, vivid magenta feathers, and deadly sharp wing tips. Too heavy to fly, they run like hell, literally, to tear away at the party's foes with beak and claw, eating their forlorn souls. They are summoned from the corpse of a friend. It can only be created by casting the Summon Findingo spell, see below. They count toward the maximum number of 4 characters in a party, and they have some some traits. They're innate killers. They add plus L to both attack and defense. These attacks count as magical. They have lightning fast reflexes, which will give a success on a surprise roll for the first round. And they have blood madness. So once they've caused a wound, they're going to succeed on all saves against the opponent for the duration. And they are ravenous, and they will be eating your food. They start the game at the same level as the party from whence they came, and if they had an expert skill, if their character, they carry over. So that's pretty cool, and it could work well sending it into something I will be playing with one of the other books I got that we're going to look at in a second. And this is the spell that can be cast. So this is, they save like, they swim like barbarians, they save like elves. They don't carry any weapons. They have their own beak and bony protrusions to count as one-handed weapons. So it's basically like a fiendish barbaric attack character with you. And then there is, looks to be like a little level 2 adventure here in the back that we're not going to take too close a look at. And that's a look into Greedy Gifts of the Guildmasters. I picked up Digressions of the Devouring Dead, which are Necromatic Dungeons for characters of any level, and this was recommended by at least one person, and it is a very dark vision of For Against Darkness. And indeed, it says, contains nude art and disturbing content. Reader discretion is advised. Bash undead hordes, outwit the deadliest traps, and count your resources carefully in the harshest, most murderous dungeons ever made for Against Darkness, the Necromatic Dungeons. We can generate them for characters of any level. There's rules for complex traps, drawbridges, balconies, levers, death traps, neurosis, and even ruling an undead city. There are 64 dungeon tiles on 2 overlapping levels with new map features, 6 new narrative missions, including an undead outbreak, over 45 new tables, and more than 50 monsters. There are some new classes: the shape-changing atrocity, the doomed death leper, the magic-bleeding mutant, the necromancer, and 3 sentient golem varieties. That's pretty cool. You have new deities for your clerics, new expert skills, some new spells, magic items, new secrets and gear, gruesome stuff tables, traps, and the infamous amputation table. So this is really, as you can see, there's a lot of material in here. It says requires only the core book. So you could take this, and you could see clearly from the cover what you're getting. Beware. And you could take this and really just play with this book, which probably I will do, and just build a party that is going to be the type of party that's going to go into this type of dungeon, maybe using even I don't know if there are 4 new classes, just the classes that are presented here. So I will, and you can see all the list here, the long list of tables here with scrolls and spells and quests, and there's this amputation table. There's more minions and vermin and undead and bosses and just more and more. So I will not spend a ton of time showing everything that is in the content of this, but the way it's presented is kind of familiar to the basic book, where you start out with the rules and explains about leveling characters and how to adjust monsters. They are the traps here. Some of the traps have complexity points, so these are like the life points of a trap. So you need to continue to work to overcome them until you reduce the trap level to 0. And it says any trap can be turned into a complex trap by giving it a number of complexity points and explaining how that works. There's this concept of neurosis. Sometimes stress becomes too much for adventurers to cope with, and at any time a character can remove madness points to acquire a neurosis from the neurosis table, which is in the back. We'll look at that later. And it's a permanent derangement that hampers a character. You can only get it once, and then it explains how to get rid of it. Here, searching rooms. There are no truly empty rooms in Necrotic Dungeons. However, once you've cleared the room of a threat, you can search it to gain a clue or finding a secret door, and it explains what that means. In this book, you will find unique dungeons which combine tables from various books, and these are meant to be examples of how you can mix and match much content from other books to create these. It also says what to do if you don't have those other books. There are ways of creating optional, even more hardcore rules, and it does involve some record keeping, it says. So there are ways to have a time limit, for example, or to have an ammunition limit, resources basically, or food rations, so you can lantern oil, things that actually diminish as you go through the dungeon that you need to manage as well. So it makes it even that harder and time sensitive, and adds to the pressure of getting through the dungeon. You will get a benefit for doing that. You're going to get a +1 to the XP checks that you make when you're playing in hardcore mode. And then it says, but only if you're playing with an Iron Maiden soundtrack in the background. There's some instructions here. Design your party carefully. Survival in hardcore dungeon is going to require thoughtful preparations. A rogue, or at least a cleric, will help with many traps. A healer is invaluable for this, and ideally a trap specialist should also join the party, and it explains who that could be. There's a supporting class concept here as well. So this is useful, I think, as a discussion, and I'm not sure really, I'm not sure that this type of thing, party composition, is necessarily discussed elsewhere, at least in the books that I have. And there are some, I will skip over some of these things in the interest of time. You can, just the rules about rolling for room size and rest. There are rules for resting in fiendish foes, and they apply here. So you'd have to go back to that book if you had it. I think I have that. Again, this is a little bit showing off what some of the perhaps negative of 4 Against Darkness is, and that there are certain things you can't use if they're referenced and you don't have that other bit. There are Abyss Netherworld rules, and these are summaries of things from other books. So here they're giving you the rules for Soul Cubes, for example, which comes from 4 Against the Netherworld. So I won't go into the detail on that. Overlapping dungeon levels. Some of the room types featured in this book feature overlapping dungeon levels. So there's, in other words, you could be at one level and look down or see at another level, and it explains what that actually means and how you can keep the cartography for that manageable, and what happens, for example, if the fight occurs and you fall down. So it's giving more depth, both literally and figuratively, to the dungeons that you are encountering and what it means to go down to a lower level. And there's flying monsters that could swoop down. So it's going to be dangerous. But to deal with this, we get some new classes, and let's just look at a couple of them. The Atrocity is Shapeshifters, Skinwalkers, Weirs. Each of the cursed ones is different, and they are transformed by chaos, and they have a couple of different forms. They have a normal or humanoid form, and they add plus half a level, but it could also transform into its monstrous bestial form. And when that happens, there are different impacts on that. So it's going to take an action for the Atrocity to transform, and then it gets the benefit from that. There could be madness points gained from witnessing the Atrocity transform, so you have to keep track of that as well. And in human form, they get allowed armor, and they don't get any allowed in atrocity form. In weapons, same thing. In human form, one-handed, light weapons and slings, none in bestial. So it's going to take a little more to manage this type of class. There's a death leper, afflicted with a horrible disease. Death lepers are outcasts who have chosen to die heroically rather than allow their ailment to claim them. And again, you're given the traits that they have and what it means for gameplay. And despite their curse, they are considered to be lucky. So when they die, they can transform the levels they gained after level 1 to the next new character you create. Well, that's pretty cool. Although having a rule for them dying indicates something about what might happen in these dungeons. And you're given, just again, standard how it saves, the armor, weapons allowed, what the expert skills might be if they advance that far. You have mutants, and you can, with a mutant, once per combat turn, a mutant may either gain a madness or lose a life to call upon a chaotic power as a free action. And I'm assuming that chaotic powers are listed somewhere here. And a necromancer, of course, there are those among wizards that seek to not only delay death by potions and enchantments, but by the gruesome means of reanimating dead flesh. And these are the necromancers. They're not all evil. They start an adventure with 3 spells plus their level, but their spell selection is limited. And I think their spells are listed probably here in the book. We'll just take a quick peek back here. So here are the necromantic basic spells. So, for example, Revelations. Make an L5 spellcasting roll to speak with a corpse with a -1 penalty if your party is responsible for its death. You can gain clues if you succeed. And if you roll a 1, you're going to conjure some hostile skeletons that you need to fight. And that's pretty cool. Let's look at another one. This is Afraid to Shoot Strangers. This spell can be cast at any time. It will protect the party. The next time a projectile-based shooting or ranged attack occurs, you get to ignore it, including dart or spear traps, but not magic gazes, dragon breath, or curses. It only protects against strangers, not enemies previously fought, traitors, or doppelgangers. And there's also an expert spell table for the necromancers. So let's look at this one. Remember Tomorrow. This can restore a character level lost to any energy-draining game effect. You spend a soul cube and make a spellcasting roll against the target's former level, +4, and if you succeed, 1 drain level is restored, but the target will gain 1 madness. If you fail, the target catches the dark plague. There's the sentient golems. Golems, also called constructs and artificials, are synthetic engines given life by powerful eldritch sorcery. They have secrets to build sentient golems. The secrets to build sentient golems have been lost to mortals, but demon artificers and the craftiest servants of chaos still know how to create new ones. I think I'm definitely going to play one of these. And again, it explains they're immune to all of these different things, but no doubt they're going to be hard to manage because they are chaotic. So that is giving you an opportunity to essentially play a monster. They save as warriors. They have all types of weaponry available and lots of life. I'm going to skip over, in the interest of time, the clerics and gods section here. There are some built-in weapons. These are new expert skills. So for the sentient golem only, it can actually replace one of its hands with a melee weapon, being a construct, of course. There's this expert first aid skill, which is cool, which is basically that if you are using a bandage and on a roll of 5 or 6, you actually don't deplete the bandage. So that's kind of a nice expert skill to have. And we're going to just move ahead here and get to, there's some bunch of missions that are 6 missions you can choose when adventuring into this. And I will leave these for you to discover. It's giving a recommended level number, and it has a title, The Damned Dwarves of Darren for example. So some basic missions to play here. And I think this is really great because it is really very self-contained in this one book. If you want to take your For Against Darkness game in this dark direction, everything you need here is in here, as long as you have the basic rules, including, as mentioned, new classes that you can play. You're not going to go in here with, an elf and a fairy. I mean, that's not going to work. The Wrathful Worshippers of Woe. That one looks pretty good. And they go up. So also what's nice about here is, let's just look back. So these are, so we've got a level 2 plus. Mission 1 is for level 2 plus, then level 3 plus. So you could start a party out at any level, of course, as we know, but you could also run up a party and then sort of get them ready to do something like this. The Fiery Fane of Fear is level 4 plus and level 5 plus. So we've got a range of difficulties here all the way up to level 6 plus and level 7 plus. I like the pairing of some of these places, it looks like, with some art that is that just adds, again, even more, an additional way of interacting with this content. And then we looked briefly already at the necromantic spells, so I won't go back to that. There is a way, I think, to either generate or get some detailed into this Nether City rulership. So you can establish your party as the new rulers of this place, and there look to be a whole bunch of rules that you can do. Again, referring to Treacheries of the Troublesome Towns. Once again, I really would love even a link. I don't usually allow links in my videos, but if somebody can give me a link to where I can find this book, that would be great. And then we have tons of pages of tables here, and very clearly marked. We have the Neurosis table. We have new tables for diagramming the dungeons, as was mentioned, with the different levels here. So you would be rolling your D8 and then going through to build the dungeon using these different shapes. And as expected, again, this is like mapped onto a standard For Against the Bane rules, except it is with this darkness and level of detail. We have the room contents, the treasure table, magic treasure, perplexingly obscure table. That adds a little twist in there. Some basic spells, we looked at that already. The advanced expert spells. There's some unique artifacts. Let's take a look at one. There's a Book of Souls, bound using the face skin of elves. This book allows a wizard of L6, level 6 or more, to cast any necromantic spell at will, gaining D3 madness points each time a spell is cast. And if you can't gain madness, you're going to lose D6 life instead. So that's pretty cool. And it sells for 800 gold. Wow. All right. There's a disgustingly gruesome stuff table that you may be encountering. I won't get into detail on that. At least as gruesome stuff table. Look at one of these. There's a brain banquet. Squirming cerebellums are waiting on a tray to be served to sophisticated ghoul gourmets. Any character, not retainers, can taste one by making an L3 poison save. If failed, you lose a life, but if you're successful, you heal a life. They can't be carried away as they spoil very soon. So, yes, gruesome, but again, with that sort of humor, I think that those of us who play this game have come to understand. There's necromantic traps and special features. I'm not going to get into this, just trying to really show you what is here. There's the amputation table we referred to. There's a quest table, so you can replace these from the basic game. So you can roll on this quest table to get set out on a necromantic quest. We have the vermin. We have a couple vermin tables here, and we have new minions and things like you would expect in an underworld kind of setting. New weird undead, a known weird undead. So a lot of new tables, new bosses. There's a naming table here. So it says, for greater immersion, roll on this table when you encounter a higher level version of a monster met before as a result of the HCL mechanic, the leveling up mechanic. So you could get the woeful whatever of the abyss or whatever. So it's a nice little table to name a character. And here's an actual table that you can roll on when you need a suitably evil name for a boss. So the Grave Knight or the Shadow Burner. And we also have a special events table to flesh out the book. So Digressions of the Devouring Dead, thanks to the people that recommended this. This is really taking it in a different direction. Very much looking forward to that, especially for the upcoming Halloween period of time where we're approaching. This is going to be great for that. And then quickly, in the interest of time now, this Warlike Woes, this is the shortest book that I picked up. I'm not actually sure whether I just got this because I got sucked in to looking around or it was recommended. That I can't really remember. It features a host of new monsters, potions, reactions, rules for gambling, new equipment, herbal remedies, a sample dungeon, and even new room shapes. And it lists here what it has. It seems to be, this is something that is going to go into the mix with some other things. It has a little bit of the faction rules here, some reactions. I'm not going to really get into this, but we'll just quickly look at some of the new gear. So, for example, for 1 gold, you can get some booze. It's low quality alcohol, and it's treated as a sleep spell cast on yourself. So if you pass out for D3 encounters, but you lose 1 madness. And there's a Warlike Woes vermin table, which has 3d6 sneezing sporelings, level 2 fungi folk. Never check morale, no treasure. Place a poison token for each wound suffered by a party member. At the end of the fight, roll a d6. If the result is less than the number of poison tokens you have taken, you lose an additional life. There's a minions table and a monsters table. A pair of assassin bugs as a level 5 weird monster, excuse me. There's weird bosses, Cyclops, a crying angel of peace. Each turn, all heroes who have ever killed a monster must save versus level 3 regret or gain 1 madness. So that's kind of cool, although you really have to keep track of, you just kind of have to know that in advance. Creepy piece of art there. Some treasures, trinkets, magic treasures. So pretty standard. There's more potions here. Pretty standard additional material that could be either just played on its own or added in. There are special events, including Wandering Monster Attack or a Wandering Scribe. So that's pretty cool. These are things, there's more minions. These are things that you could set up in your own play, gathering together, flagging material from different books, and deciding what you would be rolling on to add in some variety. There are some alternate room shapes presented here, and I guess just 6 alternate room shapes presented here. I expected more. Boss lair feature table. So this says, this is cool. Roll on this table to spice up your encounter with the final boss as soon as you know which one you're facing. So this I definitely think I would use. that it is going to provide some terrain effect, so it's slippery, or there's a trap, or there's additional guards, or whatever. And actually, this is a D66 table, so there's quite a bunch here. This is cool. There's quite a bunch here. Maybe this is what caused me to pick it up. I'm not really sure, but in any case, so that's the final supplement I got, and I do appreciate greatly input and suggestions. Here we look at what I picked up, the input and suggestions from the other video, and it is going to really change my gameplay. These three in particular will take it in different directions, and I think pairing the Guildmasters with the Adventurers Guild and the factions, I think these two together, working out a whole, in effect, backstory or environment for my party will do a lot for all the gaming. And then again, this Devouring Dead is just, it's like in and of itself something entirely other for the 4 Against Darkness line, at least as far as I have it so far. So let me know in the comments if there is anything else you're interested in my talking about or exploring vis-a-vis 4 Against Darkness. And as always, thanks for watching, and thanks for your knowledge and suggestions.